Fellow Toastmasters, my name is Tanya Mansell. Good afternoon. Our speaker
Good
today,
afternoon.
our speaker is a volunteer. Of course, the best way to thank her would be to give her honest and helpful feedback after this session. So our amazing tech master, Adam, will be putting a link in at the end of the session so you can click in and give your feedback. Also, please remember that you need to stay for the full session to be able to get your officer training and participate in the poll that Adam will be launching at the end of this session. Please remember.
Point of order.
Yes.
When he launches the poll at the end of the session, there are several of us, at least 5, if not more, who are on just listening. We're not on view.
Okay. Adam, any suggestions?
Yeah, please go ahead and as part of the training, when you registered, you had an email to Julie. Please go ahead and email her that you were attending this training.
We've emailed her with our name, yes.
Okay.
All right, then that same procedure will continue.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Adam. All right, please remember to mute your audio and to hide your camera so we can give our speaker our full attention and be focused on her. Now, I'd like to move forward with introducing our speaker. Our amazing speaker, Dr. Diana D., DTM, has been a Toastmaster for over 35 years. She is part of 2 clubs and she has held every officer position. In fact, some of those multiple times, as you can imagine, over 35 years. She's also served at various district leadership roles, including Founders District Director for the 2018-2019 Toastmaster year. In one of her past lives roles, she was a professional software trainer. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Diana D. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Welcome everybody to Secretary Training. What we will cover this hour is your role within the club and the context of that role, your responsibilities, and at the end, where you can find more information. I was educated at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, and what they taught me was something very valuable, and that was always inquire for more information. I hope you're motivated to doing a great job as secretary and will take advantage of looking at all the resources that are mentioned and maybe finding some that aren't mentioned. First, I'd like to cover some context as to how the secretary fits in the club and the club officers. I'm going to show you a couple of questions, and instead of posting all the answers to chat, before you post any questions to chat, I'd like you to choose just one office other than secretary and type it in, but don't hit enter yet. Post to everybody in chat. Those of you on the phone, I apologize that you can't participate, and I will read some of the answers. So if you have typed in the name of an officer, then to everybody, then post it now. We have president, vice president education, vice president marketing, sergeant at arms, treasurer, and I got all 6 other than secretary. Fantastic. Thank you. Now, here is an esoteric question for you. What are the minimum required 3 officers? In other words, if you don't have enough members or you don't have enough volunteers or you can't voluntold people to be an officer. I will attempt some humor during this presentation, but whether or not you laugh, I leave it up to you. What are the minimum 3 officers? I'm getting some answers. President, VPE secretary, president, secretary, VPE, president, PR. Somebody put 4, president, VPE, treasurer, and secretary. The actual answer is president, secretary, that's why you are so important, and any vice president, either VPE or VPPR or VP membership. That is if you are forced into the required minimum. These 3 people have to be different people. So if you have somebody serving in 2 offices, they can't be president and secretary. They could be, for example, secretary and VP membership, as long as somebody else is another VP. I hope that makes sense. So if you're ever in a quandary and you don't quite have enough volunteers, or you can't voluntold some people to be officers, if you can't get all 7, if you have at least these 3 with 3 different people, president, secretary, and any vice president with 3 different people in those offices, you have met the minimum requirement. Now, knowing what the 3 minimum officers are, it might make more sense if you know which officers can serve as base camp managers. So if you would like to type in that answer, if you're interested in answering. VPE, secretary, and president. Most of you are getting the correct answer. The secretary and the president, I believe, were picked because those are requirements in the minimum officer requirement. And then the vice president of education, because that is the primary base camp manager responsible for the education of the members. So president, secretary, and vice president of education. None of the other officers have access to pathways as a base camp manager, just those 3 officers. We get to the last of my introductory questions that show you how important the secretary is. So you must know that one of the answers to this question, last question, is secretary. But which 2 officers can assign the 2 club vote proxy for the international business meeting? And that is correct, president and secretary. And it turns out that either one of those, the president or the secretary, can go into Club Central and assign the proxy. It's not that both have to assign one of the 2 votes. It's that either the president or the secretary can assign the 2 votes. And it can be any Toastmaster. I know some Toastmasters who make it their life's goal to go to the international convention, participate in the business meeting, and carry some votes. And you can assign the club proxy to anybody going to the international business meeting. It is traditional that if you don't have a particular person to assign them to, that you assign them to the incoming district director. And there's a way to do that when you do. I'll show you in Club Central which tile you use to assign that proxy. And it's actually quite important to do that because I know that the top 3 officers in the district spend a lot of time interviewing all of the international candidates to help them decide where to put their votes. So it's important for them to have votes to carry. In terms of guests to members, just so you have an idea of what the other officers are doing, the public relations vice president, it's that person's job and that person's assistant's job to attract guests to the meeting, The Sergeant-at-Arms greets them and ensures that the meeting environment is ready to go. The VP Education makes sure the meeting is organized and the meeting roles are filled. These are all attributes of club quality. President makes sure the meeting runs smoothly. At the end of the meeting, the Vice President membership interviews the guests. With help, if you have more than one guest, somebody else other than the VP membership would talk to one guest, and the membership VP would talk to another guest to move the guest into being a member, or at least making sure they will come back. And the treasurer submits the member application, mainly because there's some money that has to change hands between enabling the member to pay the Toastmaster International dues and the new member, if applicable. That's just to give you some context of what the other officers do. Your responsibility as secretary: take minutes of the club and executive meetings. Why? Because it's important that there's a record of what went on at the meeting. We will cover a little later, or quite shortly, some of the ways that you can take minutes on a form or using the agenda. You will have custody of the club records. There's a resource called Club Leadership Handbook, and in the Secretary Responsibility section, it will list all of the records that you are expected to keep forever. That's something that you should know about. You maintain the membership roster, both one that you may hand out to other members and one that is on the Toastmaster International site in Club Central. You back up the base camp manager in terms of marking level completions and other base camp management tasks. Part of the Distinguished Club Plan is a requirement to report the new club officers from before the end of the Toastmaster year, and for those clubs that elect members twice, officers twice a year, to report the new officers for the second half of the Toastmaster year before December 31. And as I mentioned before, the importance of making sure the club sends its 2 votes to the International Convention. Here are some suggestions for taking minutes. And in the next slide, I will show you an example. I started out as secretary a year or so ago, or a couple of years ago. I was secretary for one of my clubs. And I tried using the agenda as a minutes template and then just making corrections on the agenda. Well, that worked okay for a few meetings, but then what happened was that somebody forgot to put out an agenda. And that really threw a monkey wrench in my plans. So I developed a template that just has everything that goes on at one of our meetings and who is attending. And I just fill that out with the different information every time. Also, taking executive committee meetings when your officers meet to record the items discussed in that meeting, recording all motions, either at the club or in the executive committee meeting, who made the motion, who seconded the motion, a summary of any discussion, and the voting result, whether it passed or didn't pass. So there are a couple of things that should definitely be recorded. One is voting in of new members. I hope your club votes in new members. Why? Because there's maybe a 1 in 10,000 chance that you may want a disruptive member, you may want to vote out a disruptive member. That actually happened in my club about 15 years ago, before we were voting in members. And very, very fortunately, the person moved away. Phew. But we would have thoroughly enjoyed having the capability of voting somebody out. So just vote everybody in. We explain to the new members, we have the sergeant at arms escort the potential new member out somewhere. In Zoom, we ask them to leave the meeting for a timed 2 minutes and then come back in. And the club votes them in. Well, I've never had a potential new member not voted in. But it's important that there be minutes of this with signed, because I heard a story about a member who was voted out that sued the club and said, you can't vote me out. And because they had the signed minutes of the person being voted in, it was deemed that they could vote the person out. So that's very important. Why is it important to record new officers and have signed minutes? Because if you have an outside bank account, if you're a community club with an outside bank account, the bank, in order to change the treasurer or officers allowed access to the club account, will require the minutes of the meeting where the officers were voted in. This in 2 columns is just an example. You can't really see it very well here or in the handout, but you can magnify it if you download the handout. And it's just, we have our club name, when we meet, where we meted, who was there, who spoke, who did which roles, who won the contests for best whatever. And in this case, we included the voting in of new officers, and the secretary actually put her signature there so that we can take this set of meeting minutes to the bank. Storing club records, here's a list. And once again, you can go to the club leadership handbook to see which of these I see some questions that I'm going to answer in a second. You can go to the club leadership handbook to see which of these records are deemed storable forever and which you don't have to keep. New member apps you have to keep forever, but the third page that has, for example, their credit card information, that should be shredded as soon as the payment is accepted by Toastmasters International. That's why they went to a 3-page new member application. Now, how do we sign new members in on Zoom? Well, first of all, let me answer this question about who signs for the bank account. Our club voted to have 3 officers sign. It's really up to your club. I would suggest a minimum of 2 people in case something happens to one of them. Now, so that hopefully answers who signs. How do we sign in new members on Zoom? The latest new member application, which came out in February, is a fillable PDF. And if you want, I went through Adobe. I have the free version of Adobe Acrobat. You can make your own you can make your own electronic signature in Acrobat. And I have a set of instructions that I made up for my club. And I'm perfectly willing to send that out to you if you wanted to send me an email requesting it. And I emailed Toastmasters International, even though it's a self-signed electronic signature certificate, which isn't as trusted as a third party, which you have to pay for. So this is free. I'm willing to send you how to do that. And Toastmasters International is definitely willing to accept a self-signed electronic signature. Remember that on page 2 of the new member app, the member has to sign. And I always tell them when they sign, they are agreeing to the Toastmaster's promise, and an officer has to sign. But they can both be self-signed electronic signatures. I hope that helps and answers that question. Yes, you are correct. Minutes for officer elections should be signed by the current, not incoming secretary, because the current secretary is recording what happened. And it doesn't really have to be on letterhead, it just has to be something signed. If you wanted to eat, well, I hate to send out actual copies of minutes. I was thinking of redacting actual names on the minutes, but I think if you just spend one meeting creating your minutes template, you can use that forever after. So for the first meeting, you'll have to type everything in Word. And then after that, you just fill in who did what. Now, in some clubs, the treasurer keeps the new member apps. The official word in the club leadership handbook is the secretary should do that because it's a club record. But if your club allows the secretary to do that and that person is reliable and passes it on forever and ever, then that's certainly okay if your club has chosen to have a variation of what the club leadership handbook recommends. At least that's my opinion. Now, what we do is we might collect the membership application before the new member is voted in, but we do not submit to Toastmasters the membership until the new member is voted in. The normal sequence is you get the membership application, you vote the member in, you submit the new member information to TI. Someone wrote, my secretary writes out what each speaker says during their speech. You do not really have to record that in the minutes, just that they spoke. Now, I have an aside. I know this is taking time, but it's important in terms of what I'm thinking. In Pathways, there's no way to record the completion of a project requirement. There is only a way to record completion of a project. The member on entering the project takes the assess your skills -before questionnaire. When they're done with the project, they take the assess your skills -after questionnaire, and that marks the project as complete. It's up to the Vice President of Education and the member to keep track of the speech or speeches or whatever the other requirements are, the action requirements of the project. And there's no way in Pathways to record that. The club minutes is one way to go back and look that up. If you go to charlottedrake.com and download her little booklet for a path, the last page of the booklet has a way for members or vice presidents of education to record projects, although you have to print it out. I am hoping one of these days somebody comes up with Excel spreadsheets that do the same thing. I'm thinking of doing that for my club, but I haven't done that yet. So it's important in the minutes to record who spoke and what project they did when they spoke. That information should be on the agenda, in my opinion. I'm hoping I am answering all your questions. In Club Central, there is a way for you to add new members and maintain the roster. Any member can log into Toastmasters International and change information in their profile. But if they choose to ask you to do it, you can do that in Club Central in the membership tile. You are back up to the base camp manager. The base camp manager's primary task is to answer requests to approve level completions. This is a very complicated subject that would require me to take 2 or 3 minutes to go into it. So I'm not going to, for the sake of time, unless I have time at the end. But those requests get emailed. So the member completes a level and sends a level completion request. At the current time, I believe that that completion request gets emailed to whatever email is on record for the club in Toastmasters International. And usually it's the club president. Well, the club president doesn't usually answer level completion requests. Some people have found a way to use one email address as the club's email address, but then that gets forwarded to several people. What I'd like to see happen in my club is that when somebody has a level completion request, they personally tell the vice president education to go into Pathways Basecamp Management and look for it, and then approve the level completion request. One of the Distinguished Club Plan requirements is to report new officers before the end of the term. So right now, your club officers, hopefully all of them, but usually most of them are attending this LACE training. The only way that our record keeper for Founders District and other districts that might be involved knows who the officers are is if they are reported to Toastmasters International. And that is done in Club Central. If you fail to do that, as of the new term, your club officers are going to lose access to Club Central, and it's not that easy to get it back. That's another, aside from being part of a Distinguished Club Plan goal, that should motivate you to get your club officers in on time. And I talked about making sure the club's proxy or the club votes, 2 votes go to convention. I'll let you read what's in here at this point. Oh, gee, I have fade-ins for this one. So this is a list from the club leadership handbook of the things you should do outside the club meeting. And since I want to leave more time for answering questions, I will let you read these yourself. Your president should schedule an executive committee meeting on a regular basis, whatever that means for your club. You are already attending LACE officer training, but you will, even if you're secretary for the entire year, you will be attending in the January timeframe. I understand the next LACE is January 9. Preparing your successor is important. Take a look at your new members and see which one or ones of them might make a good successor for you, and have them help you out and see if they are somebody that could take over for you so you can move on up to doing something else either in the club or outside the club, meaning at the district level. You really want to put out the minutes as soon as you can. Thank you, Adam. I see the green. You should probably email your minutes to all the members, and hopefully they will read it and correct you if you have an error in it. For officer meetings, send those minutes to the officers for corrections. And you could store all the files online, but make sure there's a backup. If you don't have a cloud backup for your personal files, send it to another officer who does and have them keep it. Or have some kind of cloud backup so that if your hard drive fails, if your computer fails, if you lose your computer, you do not lose your files. It's really important. These are some screen images for Club Central. So you log in, you'll see the Welcome Diana right at the center top in yellow. And if you press on Leadership Central, you'll see under Leadership Central highlighted by this yellow arrow, Club Central. That's how you get to Club Central after logging in. As an officer, you will have access to Club Central. Probably by close to the end of July, they will get it all done. It usually takes Toastmasters International at least 2/3 of July to get all the worldwide club records up to date and allow you access. And they also have club alignment to take into account, which clubs are in which areas. Let's see, someone asked, can the club charter and bylaws be downloaded from TI? I actually don't know the answer to that question. You can call Toastmasters International or email. I'm not sure which email handle would be the appropriate one for you to use. Would it be membership? Would it be, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what the email address would be for you to query them. If you go to Toastmasters Contact Us, there's a whole page they have with the lists of all of the email addresses at TI, and you should probably try to pick the right one, and if you haven't, they will forward it to the right people. So in Club Central, there are many tiles. One of them is add membership. Another one is the club roster, where you can manage the club roster. Another is club proxy, which appears during the time that you're allowed to assign the club proxy. And another one that you should complete before the end of the term is the club officer assignment. When you click on that tile, you'll get one of two items, and the one that they highlight at this time is future. So you would select that tab, and you can, by drop down in each office, you can tell them which person was elected to which office. And any officer can complete that, but make sure your club gets that done for the very, very, very minimum, those 3 minimum officers before the end of the term. So in terms of resources, you have the Club Leadership Handbook, which has its own little code to get to it directly. You don't have to use their could be better search function. And it's toastmasters.org/CLH for Club Leadership Handbook. You also have some officer tutorials. And in the tutorials, I would strongly suggest that you look first at the foundation of knowledge, which talks about all of the offices, because the secretary video is very, very brief. So look at foundation of knowledge and look at, before you look at secretary. The link to that, for those of you on audio only, is Leadership Central, Club Officer Tools, Club Officer Tutorials. Or just look for Club Officer Tutorials. Hopefully the search function will find that for you. Other resources include the Distinguished Club Program and Club Success Plan. And this follows the thing that if you know the item number, in this case, item number 1111, you can get directly to that item by saying toastmasters.org/item number. Your area director is also a very valuable resource. That concludes what I have to say. Getting started, take district-sponsored club officer training, look at the resources I have told you about, get any files to be transferred from the outgoing secretary, make your plan with the current executive committee, and make sure that a current officer has submitted the list of newly elected officers to World Headquarters. We accomplished on time, yay. What we have learned. We've learned about secretary and how the secretary role fits in with the other officer roles, your responsibility as secretary, and some resources for more information. You may post questions to chat. I see a question. When we change the officer roster, should we change the club address too? There is a checkbox that says make the club address equal to the address of the club president. You can check that box and then never worry about the address again, because it will always go there if that is something you want to do. But yes, you need to change the address. I know when they used to mail out 7 copies of the club leadership handbook, it would go to a president that was 3 years ago, and they would never have any idea who it was for because nobody had ever changed that address. So they added a checkbox that said make the club address, mailing address, that of the current president, and that's an option for you. So thank you for the compliment about the handout. So how do we transfer virtually? I'm not sure what you mean, Fred. Can you put more words into your question, like what transfer? I'm not quite...
all the records and all the records he has and so forth. He's got them probably at his house because we started out not being virtual.
Ah, I understand that. I guess you'll have to work it out.
I can wait, right, till we get back in
yes, you can wait.
our office. Okay.
You can wait. Thank you, Roz. Nice to see you. Are there any other questions? Make sure you go through those other resources because of course I haven't been able to cover everything.
Is there a poll or a question we have to answer?
Oh, there's a poll, but we're probably going to wait for 1 more minute before we put the poll up.
Okay.
We'll put it up on a poll and see if it waves. No, never mind. That's good.
You just flagged that one.
Oh, very good. I like it.
Better than climbing a pole.
I definitely would like to thank you, Dr. Deanna D. What the information you've provided has been so helpful. I know I've actually been secretary once before, and you just gave so much valuable information as far as just things that we can apply and reasons for why we need to like vote in members or what can happen in situations when we don't, and other shows such as valuable resources, and thank you for pointing us to the additional resources. So I definitely want to thank you for your time and for educating us on the secretary role.
Thank you very much.
Great job.
Yep.
Job well done.
And I did laugh. I thought you were funny. So
Good.
just thought I'd let you know.
Diana, let me know when you want to open up the poll.
When I want to,
Open up the poll.
oh, anytime you can open up the poll. And for some reason, I can't get back to chat.
Oh, wait a minute.
Well, actually, this question was meant to be single choice.
The picking was the most important. What?
Okay, so if your most important responsibility is to take minutes, but you have other responsibilities, what in your opinion, is the next most important responsibility? And opinions will vary. I just wanted to make sure that you thought about it. See, we have 70 people here, so we should get a little more than, we have 40 people who reported in so far. And for some reason, I can't get back to my chat window. I have to do that.
Did my answer come through?
Right. So how do they receive credit? I think by answering this poll is how you receive credit.
That's correct. Please make sure you respond to the poll question, and that will count towards your
So if you're not seeing the
requirement.
poll, if you're not seeing the poll because you're on audio only, I think the answer to that was send a message to Julie Murphy. Is that the answer?
That's correct. That was the email you signed up with when you attended this event.
Okay, so for those of you,
I need the poll question again because I didn't see my response.
Adam, I'm not sure how to put it up again.
Once you've answered the question, you cannot change it.
But I don't see that on the answers here.
Did we show all the answers?
Yeah, I picked one and sent it. I thought I sent it, but maybe I didn't. I don't know.
Well, I think picking one sends it.
Okay, because some
That's
I
correct.
have,
So,
this
some
is
of them
Mary
don't-
Berg.
once-
I haven't seen anything. For some reason, I missed it. Can you do it again for me?
unfortunately, I cannot. The poll is still open, so you might have to click on your Zoom window to make sure it's active, or minimize any background windows you might have open.
how do I
Once
do
you
that?
voted,
There is
once you
a,
have voted, the responses will go away.
there
I
is
have
a,
not,
there's
I
a
have
poll icon down at the bottom, right? Just to the right of participants is a poll icon at the bottom.
Diana, they do not see that screen.
Yeah.
So if you cannot see the
I don't
poll,
see
but
it.
you are on the chat, yes. So if you cannot see the poll, but you're on the,
I'm
if
not
I
on the
could speak,
chat.
please.
I don't see my name on the chat answering the question. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, you don't answer the question on the chat, you answer it in the poll.
I did, but
Well, that's
then-
what I have to find. I answered it on the chat, so I need to do it right. I don't know where the poll is. I don't see it. I just answered the question on the chat. So I don't know where it is.
Oh, then I'm okay. I answered the poll on the poll.
I'll
Let's
tell you
see.
what, if you send an email to Julie Murphy, she will note that it's coming in close to 4 o'clock. and you'll get credit. So if you're not, I hate to inundate Julie with all of this, but I think that's the only fair thing to do.
Okay, what's Julie Murphy? How do we get in touch with her?
If you look at your Zoom invitation, your email should be on it.
Okay.
I'll post it in the chat.
Okay.
Now I gotta go back. Okay, I'll find you.
I'll read it to you once it gets posted in chat.
So I was trying, hi Diane, this is Kelly. I was trying to write down almost everything that you had in those slides. Are those part of the links that you sent us?
There was a link to all the handouts. There's a handout that is in PDF format that has all the slides on it.
Okay, I already downloaded it. Thank you.
Right now,
Sure.
the only thing I see for chat is I see my name and I saw your face, but now I don't see your face. Something is wrong. Oh, start video won't make it.
Diane, one more question.
Oh, I'm back again.
Oh my God.
Okay, I will stick around for another 4 minutes.
For taking minutes, that's on a template, or we make it ourselves?
You would make it yourself. So just record everything in look at my example and then think of how your club might be different.
Okay.
And just record everything, like who was there, who were the speakers and the titles of their speeches and what project it was. And if that information is not being collected by the BPE or whoever is making up the agenda, make sure it gets collected so you can have it for the minutes.
This is my first time being secretary, so I'm just asking. Thank you.
Sure.
Me too.
Yeah, but I still would like to find out where the question is. I sent you an email, but I would like to not have done that. I'd like to know what the hell I'm doing, Tate.
Okay, so I'll just read the question again.
Find the question.
It was just to make you think. So I was thinking that you should think about all of the responsibilities of the secretary. And if taking minutes is the most important responsibility, what, in your opinion, is the next most important responsibility? And I just put some responsibilities up there: maintaining club records, maintaining membership roles, roster, act as backup base camp manager, back up the VP membership for guest follow-up, and prepare your successor. So those were your choices, and it's really your opinion that I was after. I just wanted to put up a question that you had to think about.
And I did that, but I did not know where, I didn't see the question, so I could not write it on here. I sent it to the chat and then I sent you an email. So I've covered the bases, but I still don't know where the question is. So,
You mean you want to see the
I
question?
still don't know where the poll is. I don't see the poll anywhere.
Well, did you answer the poll when it first came up?
No, I didn't. I answered it through the chat. I did, and because I don't see where it says the poll.
So the poll showed up if you switch from the chat to the presentation, but once you selected the answer, the poll disappears.
Oh, I didn't do any of it, but it's gone. But since I sent her an email, I just think that would be really nice if I knew what I was doing
I'm sorry.
on this computer, so
There's
that
a
wouldn't
club
have
for
to
that.
go through
Yeah, I have that happen every once in a while. I do something and something unexpected happens and I have no clue.
Here's the club. I belong to that club.
Okay, so I'm going to share the results of the poll so that you can see what the poll was.
Oh, okay.
It's just a list of the important responsibilities.
Very good.
Oh, let's see. We have chat, new messages.
Hi, Diana. We have about 1 minute left. So if there's any final remarks you or Tanya want to make.
Okay. I appreciate your attendance, and my goal was for this information to help you. Be sure that you seek even more information and go out and be a secretary. You'll do a great job. Thank you for attending.
How do we get credit?
Thank you.
By
I
filling out the
believe
form?
by either answering the poll or sending an email to Julie Murphy. And if you send it to me, I'll forward it to her.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Dr. D.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Thank you, everyone. We'll be closing the session.
Okay. All right. Bye.